Hello, good evening, and I hope this finds you well. Thank you very much for clicking on the video to come and join me and my chimp for an overview of the Python programming language. What I'm hoping to do here is just to give people who've never really used Python before or who have used it to a small degree and would like to learn a little bit more about it, to see some of the things it can do, how it's done, how best to do it, and how we would apply it in our workplace, particularly in the financial services industry. Intention here is to supersede or to just complement a series of Python tutorials that we've done in London and for Hong Kong and for Japan. Doing this video, this screencast, is going to allow us to reach a little bit further out and to remove the limitation around having people having to come into a classroom or to a meeting room or whatever to sit and go through this. I'll try and keep it as brief as possible. We're not here to do anything hugely technical. As I say, it's just a case of showing a few bits and pieces to get people up and running. What I've got here is a Python editor. It's one of many that you can use. You can install. This is Spider, but there are plenty of other options. It's all just a case of personal choice. But what I'm going to do is open up a few pieces of code, run them through, and just show some very basics, just as a little bit of a pilot. Going forwards, there's plenty of code demos that I've got to run past people. Today we're going to look at some basics: opening text files, opening CSV files, writing to Excel, and looking at how straightforward it is to do something like pull data off the internet in HTML format. Surprisingly simple, nothing that's going to blow your mind at all. Hopefully something which will spawn a few ideas about what you might possibly want to do yourselves with it. That's up to you for the future. So without further ado, I'm going to just get going. Well, actually, I'm going to give you a few brief words about an awful lot with it. More such data analysis. You might want to do biochemistry with it, you might want to do astrology with it, you might want to do pure numerical, hardcore mathematical number crunching with it. There's all sorts of things you can do. Python is actually quite a small installation, and the reason it's so powerful is because you pick and choose which libraries you want to apply to it to actually do the job. For us, we're going to use some basic libraries that are included with Python, but if you ever want to be really technical, you would go ahead and install whichever libraries are specific to the jobs you want to do. We'll come on to this in a later tutorial and see exactly how that works. But for now, I'm just going to fire a couple of Python scripts up just to demonstrate how it works and what it looks like. So here we've got, this is a simple text file. I am the content of the input file. And here is a piece of Python code which is going to read that text file. Nothing particularly groundbreaking. You might even ask why you would bother writing this code to read a file in the first place. There are applications, but basically what we're doing here is specifying a file, this variable f as a file. We're going to open this input file.txt, which we can see here. We're going to call it f, and then we're going to say contents is, we're going to call this read method on f, which will basically read what's in it, and then we're going to print that thing contents out. So I run that, there it is. I am the content of the input file. Like I say, nothing groundbreaking, but this is something I've used for accessing database where I'm logging on to get to run a query against a database. I don't want to have my password stored in the code. I want to actually call something like this to go off and get my password from a file somewhere. Now that file might be locked away in a file system which everybody else can't access, but the user which Python is running under can access it. So Python can read it, nobody else can. It goes off, it gets my password, it accesses the database, and it pulls me the data back. One application for it, there are many others. Okay, something equally as groundbreaking. We're going to do something very similar, but we're going to read a CSV file. Simple CSV. We've got an ID, which is just an incrementing number, a description of various things, and a value, which is just a random number. And a piece of code here, which is just going to read this test file.csv in a similar manner to how we just read the text file. When I mentioned libraries earlier, I mentioned you would import, you would install the libraries you would want to use. And what we're going to do is import it, which basically tells Python we want to use it. We want to load up all the functionality that's in this CSV, and then we're going to start using it. So some code here would, in terms of reading this CSV file. Again, you would create this this variable pointing towards the actual CSV itself, call itself CSV demo. CSV reader reads the contents of CSV demo, and then we go through line by line. Now, the first line's a header, so we're going to skip the first line by saying next CSV reader. We're going on to the next line, which is the second line, and then from that point onwards, for each row in this CSV reader, we're going to print out the first column and the second column. Now, in actual fact, the very first column would be row 0 rather than row 1. It would be row 0. So row 1 is actually the second column, row 2 is actually the third column. Row is the ID, column 1 is the description, and column 2 is the value. So, running this, we can expect to see the description and the value coming out here. Giving this a go. Description has a value of 2395. Description, yeah, banana has a value of 338415. Looking at test file CSV, you can see how this corresponds to the content of the file. Again, nothing groundbreaking, but if you've got a CSV file with 150,000 rows in it and you have 2,000 of those CSV files, you might want something that can go through that can inspect what's in row 1, column 1, sorry, determine whether you want to do something with that value or not, and maybe stream it out to another file to condense it down to sort through some data. I've used this myself. There are applications, trust me, though it probably doesn't look too great, too exciting at the moment. But yeah, there we go. There's another example of reading a file. Now, how about writing a file? Something you might want to do is write to Excel. This library is XLSX Writer, which, as you may guess, writes XLSX files. So what we're going to do here is we're going to specify, in a similar way you might do with VBA, a handle to a workbook and a handle to a worksheet within that workbook. We're also going to set up a couple of variables that will be row and column, so we can specify which row and which column we want to write these things to. We've got a list of data as well, fruits from A to G. Couldn't think of one that started with an H, so I stopped at G. And what we're going to do is quite simply work through this list of fruits, and we're going to write them into an Excel spreadsheet. Now, here, if I could draw your attention to this write Excel here, this is the file that I contain this Python script in. What I will expect when I run it is going to produce this workbook.xlsx in this very file. So keep your eyes on this. You're going to see when I run it, a file appears called workbook.xlsx, and there it is. Hasn't actually got any content for the moment. Now, because I'm using Linux, I don't actually have Excel, but I've got the free version LibreOffice, which will open up Excel files for me, and there we are. This is something that we've just created, a brand new worksheet with our 7 fruits in here. Now, XLSX Writer is a little bit limited in the sense that it will only write Excel files. You can't read them, you can't manipulate existing ones. There are other libraries that can do that. There's more advanced ones, such as OpenPixel. You can also leverage, Python itself can leverage through an interface the actual inner workings of Windows. So if you want, you can write some Python which will tap into Windows, which will then tap into Excel, and you can start manipulating Microsoft Excel within Windows from Python. A little bit complicated, possibly a little bit convoluted. Great if you know exactly what it is you want to do in a Windows context. The problem there is it adds a layer of complexity, so maybe we might want to go directly with things like XLS, XWriter, or OpenPixel. But anyway, we'll move on to this at a later date. We'll do something a little bit more interesting with OpenPixel, where we'll read, write, format, create worksheets, increase widths of columns, all the things that you want us to do usually with Excel. We'll do it with Python, and the great thing is you don't even need to have Excel installed. It will just create an Excel workbook for you. No need for Microsoft, so we are, some might argue, removing the risk of bugs and keeping the processing fast, keeping things cheap as well. Finally, let's have a little look at something a little bit different. Now, everything I've showed you so far, the text files, the CSV files, the Excel, there are actually much more simple ways of reading and writing CSVs, Excel files, HTML. Something else that we can move on to, of course, but for now I just wanted to show you the basics, and then as we progress I'll show you more advanced libraries which can handle inputs and outputs of data, exactly the sort of things we might want to do within financial services, with ease, very simply. Here's an example of it. So Pandas, very common library, panel data, right? It's rectangular data, think spreadsheets, think grids of data, anything with rows and columns. That's what Pandas deals with, calls them data frames. But part of its functionality to get data in and out of data frames is read HTML. Now there's also read CSV and read XLS. But what read HTML, can do here is you pass to it a web link. It will go off. It will go to that web page and it will pull back the HTML in that web page. Again, it's not horrendously groundbreaking, but the great thing about this is it just does it with one line. You know, once you've imported your library, you write one line of code and then you print the output. And if we were to, what I'll do is I'm going to clear this first, and then I'm going to run it, and this is the content of the BBC's business market data page. Great if you want to go trawling through websites 6 o'clock in the morning. If you want to go to the FT, you want to go got financial data you want to pull back, you can put it back, and then again we'll come on to a demo of exactly how you would then process through that data, refine it, sort it, do what you want to do with it, load it up into a data frame, and then maybe output it to Excel sheets, or maybe create a graph with it, do something with it. But you know, this is something that, again, I've written for an actual genuine application where we'll trawl through the financial media, and we'll look for certain bits of data, pull them back, put them in emails, send those emails out, and people, when they get into work in the morning, they have data there waiting for them that's already been pre-processed. Very, very simple to do, and I'll show you how to do that. So really that's all I'm going to do for now. I'll wrap this up and let you get on with your day, but a little taster of what we're going to come on to and things that we're going to look at. Beautiful Soup, this is your web scraping library. This is the sort of thing that will take this data and then go further with it. It would actually enable you to process it in ways that are vastly more complicated than you would think from just looking at something like this. There are libraries that can tap into Bloomberg. There are actual data services out there which will pull Yahoo financial data or Google financial data, Morningstar, back for you. The read CSV we've looked at, the read file we've looked at, transferring data back and forth from FTP sites, accessing databases, very, very useful one. Excel, yeah, there's a ton of stuff out there that we can do. So we put a few more of these demos together. Thank you for coming and watching the first one, and yeah, keep your eyes peeled for things as we go along. Hopefully we'll fill up about 3 hours worth of demos going forward. I think that's probably a nice round number which will suit a lot of people. But yeah, until the next time, thank you very much. Cheers, goodbye.